All right. Thank you so very much for joining us. My name is Kyle Corman. I'm with the Iowa Grain Quality Initiative, and um, we are here talking about kind of two intermingling issues that will affect grain quality. And I have Dr. Charles Herberg from Iowa State University, head of the Iowa Grain Quality Initiative, who's going to step you through items about the drought and the derecho and how they were commingled. So what we've done in the past is we've kind of had an interview format, but since we think that this is so kind of information intense, and also we want to give you some advice, we're going to do a kind of presentation / interview. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Herberg for some presentations on the drought and the derecho, and I'll interject with some questions. So take it away, Charlie.
Thank you, Kyle. Well, yeah, and here we thought we were going to have a good crop and a relatively easy fall with high quality grain. That changed rather quickly in the last 2 or 3 weeks. First of all, we have been having increasing drought. This is the drought monitor from August 12th. If we put the one from yesterday on there, the brown, not necessarily the D2 and the D3 powered orange and red, but the brown is now clear up into northeast Iowa. So the shortage of moisture is spreading. The center of the drought's about 6% of the acres in Iowa, and the next level drought is not quite 20%. That's a significant amount of grain in west central Iowa that's affected. We don't really know how much the yield will reduce in corn and soybeans, but we know that it will. It has in previous years. In 2012, for example, the yield loss was about 25%. The drought years will change the quality. Obviously, it's going to lower the yield in both corn and soybeans. Ironically, it may make the corn test weight higher unless the corn just really dies very quickly. Because we have small seeds, they pack together tightly in the test weight cup, and you actually get a somewhat higher test weight, or can get somewhat higher test weight and somewhat higher protein feed value. Again, as long as it matures more or less normally, just without moisture. And at the same time, the feed value would be higher, and the ethanol yield, that is, ethanol plants will get less. On the soybean side, small seeds is usually the consequence, which in a balance of oil and protein, one generally goes down, the other one generally goes up. And from a processing perspective, maybe about average, which means soybean meal, less of it, but maybe about average. If the plants die very quickly and don't form seeds in the pods, then it might be a little bit different, and we'll be following that through the next 2 weeks of weather. But in any event, we will have some bushels lost and we'll have some quality loss. Then along came August 10th. And this is my rendition of the area that was covered by the derecho. The red lines there basically connect the top and bottom of the storm as it progressed across the state. And that's about 37 to 40 million, that's about 37 to 40% of the area in Iowa, and I might say a pretty good cropping area. The worst of the storm was in that crosshatched area. Note the overlap. Almost all the drought area was also in the storm area. That we're not real sure how that's going to play going forward, and whether or not it will accentuate the quality loss that is already there in the drought. We just don't know. Next couple of weeks will probably tell us. We think we lost somewhere 300 to 350 million bushels of corn actually gone. That is not going to be there at harvest. And the rest is definitely going to have some significant quality impacts. Largest storm I think anybody can remember. And I think yesterday they determined the peak wind in Cedar Rapids was 140 miles an hour.
So, so Charlie, you know, we have these two intermingling events. What do you think is going to be more impactful in terms of grain quality? Is it the drought? Is it derecho? I do see we have them overlapped here, but what are we thinking right now?
I think the storm will have a bigger impact because in the drought situation, basically the plants ran out of water and have gradually been shutting down much earlier than they might otherwise have. On the other hand, with the storm, on the morning of August 10th, they were happy. By noon or 1 o'clock on August 10th, they were in various stages of either seriously injured or dead. So I think the suddenness of the impact of the storm will probably drive the show in terms of what the quality impact will be.
And one more question on this is that, do you, and I know you're not a climatologist, but you're in touch with climatologists, do you anticipate the drought continuing or broadening across the state?
It does seem, yeah, it does seem so. That's what the state climatologists and our climate people are saying is the near-term outlook. And right now, given the closeness to harvest, the only thing that matters is the near term. Long term won't have any bearing on harvest quality. So there's not a great deal of potential, so they say, for rain. And if you've watched the weather, there is a great deal of potential for some relatively hot weather next week. So that's not exactly a good message, but seems to be. So this happened. These are examples of the types of damage that the storm caused. The one on the far left, basically the corn broke off or virtually broke off and is laying flat. The second one is lodged over, second type is lodged over, tangled, down but not dead, I would say, just down but not out. And the third one, basically lodged in lean corn, which has some growth potential left. I think the consensus is we're not going to get very much re-straightening. It's going to live at wherever it is right now. And so it will have to use the sunlight as it gets it laying on the ground. And so you can see that there will be a difference. Number one over here, the corn was about dough, maybe starting dent and stage. And so a lot of sugar, a lot of soft. That's going to be light test weight, and it's probably not going to do much. The dough's not going to turn into starch, so we'll have soft, low protein, and unstorable. This is the type of material that we really need to discuss carefully with crop insurance adjusters to see that we can find a settlement option. And I think RMA is working diligently now. They've had 2 new releases this morning on how to adjust this without necessarily requiring an attempted harvest and putting that kind of material in the grain elevator, because really we don't want it there. The second category will probably fill out the ear, whatever's there. It won't probably put any more dry batter down, but it'll fill out what's there, which will give us relatively light corn and small kernels, but at least distinguishable as corn and handleable as corn, most likely. Whether that goes to town or not kind of depends on time, because the likelihood for field mold is very high. If this stuff lays there in warm and wet conditions near the ground, we're going to get moldy ears and a certain amount of toxin production that we don't want to get to town. So again, this is something you need to work very carefully with your adjuster. An adjustment now and then harvest 2 weeks later may not produce the same thing. And so how to cope with that is something between you and the adjuster, but it'll be a very important thing, excuse me, to manage. And then over here on the right, I will get corn that is reasonably normal, and since it's not laying on the ground, we probably will have less mold. And even the test weights aren't going to set any records for sure, but it will get better kernels and something that more resembles normal corn, and probably a little bit less molding because we'll get some air through the corn or the rows and so forth, and maybe a little bit better dry down. These first two are going to be a little tough on the field dry down, which won't help the mold situation. Weather will obviously matter between now and then, but the key is to get appropriate discussion and decision making with crop insurance.
Yeah. And Charlie, is there an estimation of the damage types, 1, 2, or 3, where that occurred and how much of that occurred, or is that are we too far? Can't really estimate that.
That's probably quite a guess, but if you remember the crosshatched area that was on the coverage slide, that's where the winds were in excess of 80, 100, even as we said in Cedar Rapids up to 140, but that's where the winds were the highest. So that area, we're likely to see more of 1 and 2 than we are of 3, except for, well, as you can see in this picture above, you have a few standing at the end of the field or something like that, but we're likely to have more 1 and 2, whereas at 60 miles an hour, or the area that is a little bit lower wind speed, we probably will have a little bit more of 2 and 3, and not so many fields just totally flat.
Yep. Okay.
We lost structures, no doubt. We lost elevators, whole elevators. For transparency, this is the facility at Luther, Iowa. Many of you may have seen this picture. There are other facilities that look similar. The big bins paid the price if they were empty. The smaller ones typically didn't because of the methodology of the downdraft of the wind and then going back up into the clouds. It tore the roofs off, and then you have this characteristic cave-in failure pattern. Farm bins were not exempt. We don't know how much structures were lost. One estimate is somewhere around 50 million bushels of commercial, and maybe this gets into a guess on my part, maybe the same amount or a little more of farm storage. Point here is to be made, the amount of storage that was blown over was probably less than the amount of grain that was taken out of the market. So that means we probably will not have a total storage shortage. But the grain will be in the wrong position at times. Anybody that was planning on delivering here, for example, will probably have some extra transportation involved, moving it to some place that didn't get damaged, because this facility will be very difficult to get it online by harvest. So the basis will probably be a little choppy as a result of availability here and not here. We may see piles. I don't encourage that. I think we have other options with this elevator storage around. I don't encourage farmers to make piles. Farm piles, small piles, are harder to manage than big, and so you tend to get more spoilage, and it's more difficult to handle in small piles. So I think the net effect will be a little more driving around with the grain, but I don't think we're going to need a lot of temporary storage. The price may waver a little bit as a result of that, but I don't think we'll necessarily have to put temporary storage on farms so much. And the quality of the grain is going to be poor enough that it's not something you want to leave in a pile very long anyway. If you had to pile it, if you got it dry and you had to pile it, you wouldn't want to leave it there very long. it's just, this stuff is just not going to store. So the stuff in the storm area, I think, needs to move on to its market absolutely as quickly as possible. And with the Category 1 material, if there's any grain there that can be harvested, that's probably best destined straight to cattle.
So that's another point there, that we have some quality issues, and the Category 1 that we saw in the last slide, straight to cattle. I mean,
yeah, I do think that's the best end use, rather than try to mix it in with other grains and then cause problems for a larger amount of grain than we need to.
Mm-hmm.
So crop insurance is key to make some sorting of the worst of the damage and not have to harvest it. Recognize that this is going to require some scouting on your part, even if you have a field that you think, oh my goodness, why do I want to spend another 5 minutes on this? It's on the ground. Well, if you can't harvest it right away or do something with it right away, then we will get mold development, and you do need to pay attention because mold is usually a precursor for toxins, and then things get more difficult to deal with very fast. The commercial system is not really that capable of dealing with aflatoxin or fumonisin, and so the goal is to keep it out, and that means some close paying attention and perhaps rediscussion with the crop adjuster if that happens, to factor that into the valuation, and maybe that would change the settlement or change the direction of what you do with the grain. Both of them will have their share of storage risks, but I think we'll have enough storage, just not always in the right place, maybe. Don't try to hold this corn after you harvest it. Don't try to hold it wet or dry it slowly or dry it with air. None of those things, because this will spoil very quickly. And the best, if you do get grain that is handleable as grain, dry it as quickly and cool it as quickly as possible, because it has very low storage properties, and it certainly doesn't have properties you want to keep in the spring or summer, next spring or next summer, which has some impact on your marketing plan. Maybe if contracted grain next summer is part of the package, well, the storm damaged corn would be not the grain that I would choose to have at that time. I think it would not be in very good condition. So, and this situation will continue, and we'll have updates on this as harvest goes along. Pay attention to our website. And Kyle, you have any more questions for me?
I do have one question, and it's really about, we see that there's going to be kind of a string of hot temperatures, at least in central Iowa where I'm looking.
Yes.
What does that mean for the crop right now, at least that are going to experience these kind of pretty high temperatures?
Well, yeah, Kyle, in the drought areas, it's probably, if it isn't been heavily affected by the storm, in the drought areas, it's probably going to be done. That will probably finish the crop off, and that may well extend up into northeast Iowa as well, depending on the level of temperatures and the coverage of that. For the grain that's on the ground, I think there's supposed to be a fair bit of humidity, which means that we're not going to get a lot of drying out of the stuff on the ground. Can't get air through it anyway, so it's going to dry slowly. It's not going to do the mold development situation any good. The two fungi that we think might be the ones that are of most risk, the ones that produce aflatoxin and fumonisin, are generally warm temperature fungi. So So it's not going to do that any good. The only advice I can give here is pay attention. You go out and look at what's happening to that stuff on the ground if you intend to harvest it. And if you haven't already taken it as silage, which some have, why, pay attention. And when or if you start to see mold growth on the ears, one, reconnect with your crop insurance agent. And two, see how quickly you can harvest what you can. If it will be wetter, I'm sure, but see how quickly you can harvest what you can, because it's not going to. The fungi will win. If they're left alone, they will win.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Charlie. I think looking at the drought and the derecho and they're kind of intermingling. I think we have some good advice, and I'm sorry to say it's a pretty tough situation out there right now.
Tough. Yes, it is tough.
But we'll be on it, and as Charlie said, check our website and get in contact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.